Okay, guys, we're getting real close to line selection time. Gonna be happening sometime, I'm hoping next week when this video is released. Depends on timings of when I get things in anyway, but anyway, I'm rambling. Welcome to the final video that you'll need pre-Lions selection to tell you who's going to be in the Lions team. Okay, this isn't just any old list where I talk about a player I like and say, oh, he's a bolter. That's not what we're doing here. Some common sense into this. Some real, true, blue-blooded analysis. Okay, so to start with, there's going to be a bolter. There might be even two. But don't expect a bolter to be a back rower or a winger or a fullback, because let's be real, for the Lions tour, we have so many of them that there's no way a bolter will get in because it will push out someone in that position that deserves to be there. Okay, I watch podcasts and I listen to YouTube videos and I see endless amounts of people saying, oh, Henry Pollock's a bolter or this winger's a bolter. Guys, we need to have some sense in here. Bolters are usually picked in positions that there aren't a lot of people. Well, it's not there aren't a lot of people. There's people that are really aspiring in a position that doesn't have a wealth of experience there, doesn't have a wealth of talent there. So I'm just going to keep that in mind, okay? We're going to go through the positions. They're going to be all higgledy-piggledy, and there's a reason for that. Because I'm going to go through the order of positions of the positions that I'm most certain of, right? The positions I am most certain of that those will be the players going at that position. So it's going to jump around. We'll summarise it at the end, what the total squad is, through all the positions and everything. But just bear in mind, I think just for adding a little bit of suspense and kind of building up to a crescendo, I'm going to start with the players and the positions that I think we're most certain of we're going to have in this line selection. And then work forwards from that until probably the ones that are a bit wilder calls, a bit more out there, a bit crazier. So I said that it's based on evidence. I said it's based on, analysis, hardcore analysis, journalism, being a journo. Where does this analysis come from? Where does this journalism come from? Well, I started off with doing research for the last 3 Lions tours to determine how many on average were taken at each position, right? I kind of took an average out and then I kind of like tweaked the numbers a little bit to kind of represent what this Lions pedigree has a lot of talent-wise, if that makes sense. So I'll break down the numbers for you a little bit more. So for Loosehead Prop, for the last 3 years, average of 3 players. Hooker, 3 players. Tighthead, 3 players. Second row's an average of 5.333333333333 recurring players. Back rows 7, Scrum Halves 3, Fly Halves 2.66666666666667. We've got centres at 4.666666666667. For the back 3, we've got an average of 6.666666666667. And making up of those back 3, how many are fullbacks is an average of 2.666666666666666666666667, right? So what does this average out do? What do I kind of like make in terms of my numbers going forward? So I'm going to go for a total of 37 players, and how it's going to be broken down is we're going to have because the front row is easy. So loose heads, hookers, tight heads will have 3 of each. Very easy. That's what it's always averaged out to. Okay. Second rows. I think in second row land, I think there's less second rows that are deserving to go on this Lions tour than maybe in previous Lions tours. There's more back rowers. So for that, I've gone for 5 second rowers. And for back rowers, I've also gone for 7 of them. Remember, the average was 7. I'm going for a 7 for them. Scrum Halves, going for 3 because they've had 3 for the last 3 tours. I think that's pretty safe. Fly Halves, I've gone for 3. Centres, 4. And for the back 3, I've gone for 6. So yeah, I'll talk about fullbacks and everything when we get to it. So that's a total of 37 players. So let's start with the position I'm most certain about. It's got to be, for the Scrum aficionado, it's got to be Tighthead Prop, right? Tighthead Prop. Picking the three. I think this is quite simple, quite easy. I think it's Xander Fagerson. I think he is good. I know I've been a critic of his in the past, but I think watching Glasgow and seeing his importance of when he's not there is a huge difference. And like, he's over the last 4 years, his stock has just risen from his performances. So I think he's definitely in there. Tide Furlong, he's obviously got a huge amount of backing in terms of Ireland, obviously an Irish head coach, but that's not the only reason. I know he's been injured for a long time, but he's now back, he's playing, and he has such a British and Irish Lions pedigree as well, that not only do I probably expect him to be starting if he's fit and healthy, because he's probably the best tight head there, I would expect him to kind of be like a leadership figure within this squad as well. So that Tide Furlong is in. The third tight head I've gone for is Will Stewart. I think Will Stewart is had a really good kind of improvement in his career, especially from the Autumn Nations last year. A lot of you guys gave me some laughing faces when I've been putting him in Lions tours. I did that early on from when I saw from the Autumn Nations. I don't think who's laughing now, because I think a lot of people have Will Stewart within their teams. So let's not make this too verbose. I think those are the three selections. I don't think there's too many other questions about who should be in those three slots. Next position, as I said, higgledy-piggledy. We're going to go straight to Scrum Halves because, again, so we've got three to select from. Should be very, very easy to get to because I think the three are quite obvious. I think the first name in that team sheet is Jameson Gibson-Park. Excellent Scrum Half. Again, he's probably the starter for me at the moment for this Lions, for their test series. Alex Mitchell, I think, is absolutely sensational for Northampton. I think he's, massively improved over the years. Much like Will Stewart, I think. He's really kind of taken the 9 shirt for England and made it his own, and he's continuing to play really well for Northampton as it is as well. There's no doubt in my mind that he should be going. And then the last spot was a bit of a toss-up, right? I think it was either going to be Thomas Williams or it was going to be Ben White, and I think both of them are deserving of it. But recent form is always tricky for me to evaluate into who deserves more. But I don't know. I just feel like Thomas Williams just does attack a little bit better than Ben White, and that's what Ben White is known for. That's what he's so good at in terms of knowing when to scalp and when to go for it. I know his box kicking is great as well, arguably better than Thomas Williams's, but there's also a factor if you're trying to pick Welsh players where you can, because I just don't think there's that much representation that's available that would be good enough to be on the Lions tour. And I definitely think Thomas Williams meets that mark. And I think ever since the Six Nations, he's actually been playing really well for Gloucester. Those of you that don't watch the Premiership regularly, you may not know this, but he's been playing great. Whereas I can't see, I haven't been seeing Ben White even starting for Toulon since the Six Nations. So I just think he edges them out, and I'm pretty sure that will happen for the factors that I've mentioned. So, fly halves. This is my third most sure position. Probably going to be a bit controversial, however, so bear with me, and I'll go through the explanations. First of all, I think I'm going to go for the name that's the least controversial in terms of a pick for going at fly half, Finn Russell. I know there's been a lot of talk of Johnny Sexton's now part of the coaching staff. Is he going to allow Finn Russell to go on the tour? I don't really buy into that. I think, for all of Finn Russell's ups and downs, and I think of recent there's been a lot of downs, but then there's been a lot of great performances for Bath since the Six Nations that have balanced that out. He is the most talented fly half the British and Irish Lions can select right now, and the most experienced, other than maybe Owen Farrell, who, there's a lot of talk about him coming. Is Owen Farrell going to be part of this Lions selection because of Andy Farrell? I have not included him in here. I mean, not to ruin any surprises, I've not put him in the centre selection either. I have not put Owen Farrell in. I know, so Owen Farrell is a fantastic player, right? And no one can question character or anything like that. But I just feel like including Owen Farrell for the season that he's had for Racing 92, which is he spent the majority of it injured, and I know he's starting to play better now that they're coming through. It would feel like the only reason that he would be within the team is nepotism. It's not on form, and when there's so many good fly halves, I think, playing at the moment, and I'm arguably leaving out fly halves that are playing well, better than Owen Farrell. I can't justify him within the team. The only thing that I'm not sure of is that obviously Andy Farrell being on a tour with his son, I mean, for us it's a great story, but for him and for both of them, they would love that, but I can't see the justification for it, and I don't see Andy Farrell being a coach that would pick players based off of favoritism, which this would be. I mean, I don't think there's any other word for it. He might prove me wrong, but it is what it is, and that's why Owen Farrell's not in the selection. So, who are the other two fly halves that I've picked? I've talked about him before, about being a possible kind of like forcing his way into this British and Irish Lions team from maybe a year ago, being on his domestic team's bench or a larger squad, and that's Sam Prendergast. I'll keep it brief because I've said this 1,000,001 times about my description of him. I think he's come into this Leinster team in particular, and he's, as I've described Leinster's like a Ferrari. It's a high-end sports car, but it needs a high-end driver to drive it and put it through the gears. I think the real difference in this Leinster team, and yes, they have RG Snyman, and yes, they have Geordie Barrett, but I think the real difference here is that they have a real playmaker and X-factor at their fly-half position, which for me makes them clear favourites for this Champions Cup. And for me, I think makes them the best domestic team I've seen in a really long time. I think you'd have to be going back to those 3 years where Toulon won the Champions Cup 3 years in a row to really compete with the team that you have here, right? I think this Leinster team is better than the Toulouse team that won it last year. I think it's better than the La Rochelle teams that have beat Leinster. I think it was 2 or 3 years in a row. This team's better because Prendergast is in there and he is the glue pulling the forwards and backwards together in perfect symphony. I think you just look at the quarterfinal and how he put the team in a position to perform. I'm talking about any time that Glasgow tried to get out of their own half, Prendergast would do like a wonder kick to put them right back into their own half and put them under pressure. And then it was looking for the right options at the right time and putting players in positions where they would succeed in terms of positioning and passing and making the right choices. I really, the criticism for Prendergast is on the front foot, freaking excellent, right? But it's when he's on the back foot, that's when things start to fall apart. And not fall apart, that's probably an over-exaggeration, but he's a young guy, but he needs to kind of learn through those challenging elements, especially against really physical teams like South Africa. But we're playing Australia, who aren't as physical as that. So I think he goes on this tour. I think that he definitely has a greater chance because he's Irish, with Andy Farrell being the head coach. He's my second fly half I'm taking. Talking about my third fly half, and again, this is a young guy, young fly half, who I think's had, again, a very coming of age kind of trajectory, much like Prendergast has. Although actually, to be fair, he was probably playing really well domestically for his domestic club sooner than Prendergast was, but has recently had the international chances to prove how good he is. And that's Finn Smith. Finn Smith, I think, played excellently for Northampton all of last year. Earned his place within that England squad, but was kept out by a very informed Marcus Smith, who I'll get on to talking about later because he's an obvious omission from my 3 selections of fly half. He's an excellent controller, distributor, game manager. And I think he really balances out these 2 other fly half selections that are, not that they don't distribute well, I'm not saying that, but these are kind of superstars, X-factors, the plays made by them, whereas Finn Smith is excellent at distributing the ball around the pitch and enabling others to succeed. and putting the ball where it needs to be at the right time and the right place. And as an England fan, massively excited for Finn Smith's future. And I just think he balances out those other two fly half selections that you've got there, right? In terms of what he can offer and what he can do. And yeah, those are my three fly half selections. Marcus Smith. So, Marcus Smith. You know, when I was going through this Lions Tour selection, I think the first thing that I looked at was players that absolutely need to be within the squad. And then after that, it was like players that are really good but have good flexibility in terms of how they play. Can Marcus Smith play fly half and 15? Does your mother take it up the arse? The answer to both is only on the weekends. I don't see Marcus Smith, you know, playing 15 in a midweek game to kind of test out his flexibility. I don't see him being, if he's playing as fly half, because I just think there's just so many other good fullbacks that are available that we can pick, and we'll get into those. I think he's been put at fullback, I think, purely because George Furbank's been injured. Just because we don't have in England anyone that's experienced enough, one, and quick enough, two, to play in that 15 shirt. Caveat of that is Elliot Daly, who can play in so many different positions that he's better off the bench, if that makes sense. So, unfortunately, it's a bit of a mission. I do think a lot of what has pushed me towards this decision as well is that Marcus Smith has been in, I would say, poor form in the Premiership, in Europe. I mean, those of you that only watch the URC or you watch the Champions Cup, you saw that Harlequins-Leinster game, right? You saw what happened. And, it's part of the course. Harlequins look like they're just cruising to the end of the season, trying to do their best, and Marcus isn't even been playing particularly well. There is a superstar element with Marcus. I went to Leicester Quins last weekend, and all the kids and all the fans loved Marcus Smith, cheering his name, even though it was at a Leicester home game. But I can't justify him being in this team when I think there's just so many other fly halves playing well, and other fullbacks that we'll get into playing so well as well. So, unfortunately, I don't think he makes it onto this squad without an injury occurring. So, that's my thinking. That's where I've gotten to where I am. And, we'll move on to the next position group. Next position group is actually sequential to the fly half, is centres. So, I'll just kind of whip through the centre selection that I've gone for. I'll talk about kind of any omissions, etc. But without further ado, I think there's some obvious ones here. I think Tuipulotu, even though he's been injured for so long, I think he's probably the standout centre selection. Can play 12 and 13 from what I understand. He's just excellent. I think there's not too much else I need to say, because I think a lot of people would think he's going. Bundyaki, probably pretty similar. More of an out-and-out 12, but probably the standout 12 at the moment. I think there was obviously a lot of conversation about Ollie Lawrence and how well he was playing in the Six Nations, but unfortunately he's had the injury that he's had and he won't be making it on this tour regardless. So Hugh Jones is the next selection. I think, up there, I think in terms of try scorer of the Six Nations, I don't think he was top, but he scored a hell of a lot. I think both in attack and defence, he offers you so much. Plays really well for Glasgow. I don't think anybody would really be questioning this selection in the tour either. The final selection, so I've only gone for 4 centres, and we'll get into that later why, because I think there's there's things all around. I won't ruin it, but there's players later on that I think can fill in these centre shirts anyway, and that's Robbie Henshaw. And I think for me, it was either selection between Robbie Henshaw and Gary Ringrose. I don't think there's anyone really else that you can be putting into this team. There's Ben Thomas and there's Max Llewellyn. Max Llewellyn maybe, but not really. I don't know whether he's still trying to find what his position is in that Wales backline. But Robbie Henshaw's, he's a really solid pick, and he can play 12 and 13. And I think that flexibility for me puts him on the plane compared to anybody else in terms of dedicated centres. So, those are my 4 centres: Aki, Tuipulotu, Jones, and Henshaw. Okay, back 3. This one is I love talking about this because it's probably one of the positions that I kind of like and ahed about so much. But after a certain amount of time, when I got the names out there, I just thought, yeah, these are the names that are going. I'll break it down to start off with. So only went for two like out and out fullbacks that, you know, that's their position, and I think they're obvious. So Blair Kinghorn and I think Hugo Keenan. You know, Blair Kinghorn, you know, gets a lot of limelight, plays for Toulouse, had some great games for Scotland. I think the last two games for Scotland that he played in the Six Nations, he played really well after starting off not so good. But, you know, he's gone from strength to strength ever since he came in and filled in for Stuart Hogg in the Scottish team in the World Cup 2 years ago. So, obvious choice. Hugo Keenan, I think, was another obvious choice. I think he doesn't get enough praise. I think, you know, as a lot of, I won't say this is my own analysis, I've seen this of other people, but I agree with it, that Hugo Keenan, you know, rarely has a bad game. You know, if you're looking for someone who gets 8 out of 10, like every single game, Hugo Keenan's your man. You know, never caught out of position, defensively really sound. Even, you know, he's a smaller kind of back, but, you know, he never kind of gets caught out or run over, which is great. Good under the high ball as well. So he had to be in this team for me. I think there was no question. And they're kind of the two dedicated fullbacks that I've got in this team. And as you can see with those, you know, they're better than, I think, Marcus Smith at playing 15 than these two, right? So you can see why those are in there. And then we get into kind of more winger territory, right? Who are we bringing in as wingers? I think there's two obvious choices, and then there's there's my two less obvious choices. But keep it simple. Start off with obvious choices. James Lowe, Duhan van der Merwe. I see these. I know they play the same side in terms of winger. I believe they do anyway. But, you know, I could see one of them playing one side and one of the other, especially with James Lowe with the left boot. Stick him on, is it right wing? Yeah, stick him on right wing, kick, and then Van der Merwe can work out what left wing has to do. Just, you know, you can make it work, make it work. I think they're transferable skills. I think you'll be fine. I think that they're just two powerhouses, and they're also very, very quick. And I think, you know, there's arguments that they're probably some of the best wingers in the world right now as well. So not too much to say about that. I don't think too many people will disagree with my analysis there. Now to talk about the two other selections that we've got here for back three. The first one for me is Tommy Freeman. I think he's played excellently in the Six Nations. I think he was top try scorer, right? Or he at least got, I think he got the record for most consecutive games with a try or something. Excellent player. I've liked Tommy Freeman since he's been within the England setup, but I think we are starting to see him kind of make that next step to kind of like that superstar level of like Mark Cueto or Chris Ashton, where he, you know, you're watching a game with Tommy Freeman, you're more than likely watching him score a try. There's also, again, that flexibility. Can play at that 13 shirt. We've only got 4 centres coming in. Can fill in there. That flexibility, I think, aids a lot with him. And when we're talking about flexibility, that brings me to my final selection in the back three, and that's Elliot Daly. And I think a lot of people will probably be like, Englishman, picking Elliot Daly, you know, bias pick. But I want to try and let me try and explain to you why I think this is not a bias pick and why it makes the most sense. First of all, Elliot Daly, I think, came in for England over the Six Nations in like really key plays and times and really held it together like nobody's business. You know, people give him, he got stick for being like an old guy pick and a progress stop or whatever, because he's obviously getting up there in years. But there's something to be said about the fact that he can play 15, he can play wing, and he can play outside centre. He's like almost the perfect man on the bench, that you would want so that you can have like 6 forwards on the bench and basically have like a bomb squad if you want to go in that direction. He opens up just so much for what you can do with the rest of the team because he can play all those positions. He can cover all of that. And when he did that for England, he showed that he still, at a very high level, can play all of those positions because he filled in on all those positions at one point or another. He can play all of those positions at a really good level. He did that in the Six Nations. He proved he can still do it. I just think his form is just so good at the moment. I genuinely think he's playing some of his best rugby. and I've not been an Elliot Daly fanboy my whole kind of like rugby watching career, but I genuinely feel like he's playing excellently. And please do not be surprised if he's within this Lions tour announcement, just because of the flexibility it gives and also the form that he has. I think it would be fully deserved for him to go on this tour, and if he does, everything can point to him being put on the bench, at least on the bench, in some of these like Wallabies tests. So let me know what you think. I know he's English. I know you're thinking Englishman's picking Englishman. I just think there's a lot of evidence there for my argument. So I'd love to hear what you think about it. Okay, so next position, second rows. Second rows is tricky. When I was going through it, there's not a whole lot of second rows that I think are that are like at the level that need to be. I mean, there's some obvious ones. The first two names I put within this selection of 5 second rows is Maro Itoje and Ty Burn. I think they're probably the odds-on starters to be starting the first Wallabies test. Those are obvious to me. I think after that, though, then I just started to kind of look through the names, and I was like, yeah, well, he was good at this, but then there's this weakness here and everything. But I think there's some big selections here that I've gone for. So I've gone for Ollie Chesham. I think he gives you flexibility in the back row and also the second row. But with the amount of back rowers we're bringing in terms of 7 back rowers, I'm not sure that's necessarily needed. But he has a great line-out option, which when we get into the back rowers, I'm not sure there's a huge amount of those that can be chucked up in the air. So I think he's really good for that. I think he really does thrive in a second row shirt rather than a back row shirt, because it's like having another back rower on there. But at the same time, he's got the mobility of a back rower, but he's still got the physicality of a second rower. I really like him as a player. Obviously, Leicester player, I'm going to be a bit of a homer in that regard. But I think him coming in and replacing George Martin for England in the Six Nations made a big difference. My next selection is Joe McCarthy. I've been a big fan of Joe McCarthy since he came in. The reason that I was umming and ahhing about Joe McCarthy and he wasn't just chucked straight into this second row names list is I think he's had a dip in form. Young guy, he's got a long career. He came on the scene I think he won man of the match in his first game in the Six Nations 2 years ago against France. So he came on the scene like a firebolt. Then he got injured, and he's not just been that domineering presence that he was in that first year for Ireland, but in terms of ceiling, in terms of talent and ability to play, I just don't see any other second row that you can be putting in there that is of that level. He's also just a bit of an enforcer, big dude, and you need some of those in your teams just to kind of physically dominate your opposition, both in attack and defense. So I think there's a good chance he makes it into a starting 15 jersey if he refines some of that form that he had 2 years ago. I think his ceiling's massive. And in a kind of similar vein, because we've got so many back rowers, I've kind of picked someone in my final position of second row as I've picked someone that is a true out-and-out second rower. And I'm going to need a little bit of an explanation of this, of why he's here. It's Stafford Jenkins of Wales. I think, there's a lot of players that could be going in this position instead of him. I think James Ryan, Chandler Cunningham South, who can play back row and second row. But the reason I went for Stafford Jenkins is, there's a lot of hidden stats that kind of get lost in the sauce for this Six Nations. Amount of tackles he makes, amount of lineouts won, amount of lineout steals. He does a lot of hard graft, a huge amount. And I know he's in losing teams in both Exeter and Wales, but he's a really young guy, and the statistics that he pumps out for what he does, and I'm pretty sure he's like a marathon man in terms of he plays 80 minutes most games. He's also fairly mobile, and he does have that kind of sort of enforcer kind of physique to him, much like Joe McCarthy, which I think this team really lacks in that second row shirt. Team, I mean this squad and the selection of players that you have. I think he's better than a lot of people give him credit for. I think he's got a really bright future. Wales, I don't think will be bad forever. And I think in about five years' time, I think we're all going to be looking at Daffy Jenkins in a very different light, just because of how the rest of the team plays. I think he's a great player. I think he's got a really bright future, and I think he would fit into this British and Irish Lions squad perfectly. So, I don't expect everybody to agree with me there, but just my thoughts. So we go on to the next position group that I'm most sure of, and this one is gonna tickle some boots. But just bear in mind that for this, as my dog coughs onto the sofa. Okay. All right. Just bear in mind with this that when I kind of went through this is like really far down in terms of what I'm sure of. Just because there's just so many good back rowers that you can select from. And there's some notable exceptions in here that, if there wasn't so many back rowers, I think are better than some of the other players that I've put in other positions within the squad. I hope that makes sense, what I just said. But there's just such a plethora of good selections. Some have to go and some can't. I've even gone to the point of like bringing 7 back rowers. I could have gone 8. But then again, the problem is that a lot of the back rowers, they don't really play other positions. There's not a lot that can play second row. So you're kind of limiting yourself a little bit. Whereas in the back rows that I've selected, there's a lot of flexibility in where they can play in the back row. So many can play 7 or 6 or 8. And I'm just hoping with the 7 that I've got, there's a mix in there where they can all kind of like mix and match to create a back row with what you want to do, either jackling or ball carrying or a mix of that. And yeah, so without further ado, I'll go with probably the most obvious to the least obvious. I think Caelan Doris and Jack Conan, I think, are obvious choices. And I think, they speak for themselves. I think for me as well, I'm not of the opinion that Maro Itoje is going to be the captain of this squad. I think I can understand why he would be, just because he's done a great job for England for the few games that he's captained since he came in, and having an Irish coach and an English captain would be a great mix. But I don't see Andy Farrell picking anyone other than Caelan Doris as that captaincy. I know he's kind of come under flack for talking to the ref too much and putting his team in precarious positions because of it. But I don't see anyone other than Caelan Doris being the captain, just because if it's all of a sudden like people are saying Maro Itoje the odds-on favourite when for a year and a half everyone was saying it was Caelan Doris. So I just don't see it changing for recency bias because of that. Jack Conan is an obvious choice just because of he is like the ultimate super sub. He's like Ireland's answer to the bomb squad in terms of what he brings on in terms of power game. And also what he can do even if he starts for and plays for a full 80 minutes. He bundle of energy and he plays great. He also is a line-out option. So that's another thing about Jack Conan. Going on, okay, the next 3 I'm also fairly sure will be going. It's Tom Curry, Ben Curry, and Ben Earl. I think the Curry brothers really put their names forward in terms of getting selected, the both of them, for the way they play for England over the Six Nations, and also how they're playing for Sale at the moment. Both of them are just physical menaces. Jackals galore, but also like big ball carriers and very mobile. They've really come into form right at the right time for this line selection. And Ben Earl, since the World Cup, has just gone from strength to strength. A true 7 that can play 8. Massive improvement to his ball carrying ability since he started playing for England as well. I don't see him not getting selected. I think he's been so good. Jack Morgan is my other selection. There is an element of putting him in because he's Welsh, and there's only 2 of the Welsh guys in here, but I do think he's earned it. I think he's the best Welsh player at the moment by far. And if you're putting in Daffy Jenkins and Thomas Williams, this guy's got to go. I think he is a real grafter, so quick, so jackally. And my final selection, again, you're going to think this is biased, but I don't care, is Jack Willis. Again, flexibility of 7, 6 or 8, can play any of them. And he just plays so well for Toulouse week in, week out. And I think you're going to be seeing... I'm recording this the week before the semi-finals of the Champions Cup. And I think you for those of you that don't watch Jack Willis week in, week out, you're going to see why this guy's going on the Lions tour. I don't think England particularly miss him because we've just got such a plethora of good back row talent. But what I would say is that he's better than any back rower we have. Like, he's that good. Like, he's sensational. And he's captaining Toulouse. Imagine captaining a team in a country that you're not from, it especially was one that has such rich culture of rugby itself. You know, that says a lot, I think, about leadership. There's so many elements that are both tangible and intangible of why Jack Willis, I think, will be going on this tour. I'm more than happy to talk, and discuss with you guys about that. But with that, with those 7, so Doris, Conan, Earl, Curry, Morgan and Willis, there's some obvious omissions, and I'd like to just talk about them and why I haven't selected them. So Josh van der Flier is a big one. Obviously, played very well for Ireland. I think he's had a bit of a dip in form from last year, where he was European Player of the Year. But I don't know. I just think there's other players in here that it's just so tight. It's just so tight. And I would understand if Josh van der Fleer's in this team. I think he definitely earns it. I think if it's any other Lions tour, he's stepping on the plane straight away. But there's just so many good back rowers. So it's not like I haven't considered him. I just think there's other selections there that have really kind of earned it. There's obviously Scottish in there as well. And that's not to say that they haven't played fantastically. They have, I think, Rory Darge, Matt Fagerson, Jack Dempsey. I'm a fan of them, and I would kill for any of them to play for Leicester. Especially Jamie Ritchie as well, with his renaissance and how he's come back into the Scotland side after losing his captaincy and having some really amazing performances, especially against England. I thought he played fantastically. It's just the competition's so high. And then there's obviously the bolter of Henry Pollock. Everyone's saying Lions bolter, but I think you can start to see. I think you saw it when I went through kind of the backs, why Marcus Smith isn't included, and Fair Weboso, who maybe is a bolter. Well, not really a bolter. He's had an England cap, but you can see why there's so much competition at those positions. You can't justify putting in a bolter in that position. But it is what it is, and I think I've picked the best 7 available to be playing in those back row shirts. I'm very unsure about this. I just think there's so many different combinations that you could easily go, yeah, those guys are all deserved to go on the tour. It's just such an intense competition for those back row shirts. Okay, I have left the best 2 positions for last. We started with the front row. We're going to end with the front row. And we're going to start the end with hookers. Okay, so a couple of easy selections in here. It's just the final one that I'm kind of thinking, is this going to happen? Probably not. But I think the obvious ones are Dan Sheehan and Jamie George. Dan Sheehan is a freak of nature. He's the best hooker in the world. I don't think there's a question of it. And I think Jamie George, I think he's had such a good career with England. He's got a wealth of experience. And if I'm playing a British and Irish Lions team tomorrow, there's no one I'd rather have on that hooker position on the bench behind Sheehan than Jamie George, to just bring on experience, settling nerves, and know how to close out a game for the last 20 minutes. A really, really good player. Which leads to the third and final position of the front row, right? Sorry, the third and final position of hooker. Because, every front row has 3 going. And I am going to give this to... I've got a name written here, but I don't know if I'm going with that name. There's about 2 or 3 different names I'm thinking of. I was tempted to go with a bolter here. One of 2. Because there's one that Loosehead Prop that I'm definitely taking. And it's kind of like a pet pick for mine. It's kind of a pet pick for me, sorry. F it. We'll go with it. Gabriel Ogra plays hooker for Bristol. I think pre-Six Nations he was the inform hooker in the Premiership. He's so good. He's unbelievably good. For someone who knows front row, he is a really good hooker. You know, him and Harry Thacker are probably the best hooker combination in the Premiership right now. And I just think all the other selections that you could have at hooker that are going, that you could pick international, are all just kind of like, okay. So like, for example, like Scotland is Dave Cherry. It was like, yeah, okay. You know, or you could have Ronan Kelleher. It's like, yeah, okay. But I feel like Gabriel Ogra has got a bright future for England. I think he's 25 now. But I think when he's given his chance in that 2 shirt, which I think will happen once Jamie George retires internationally. I know Theo Dan is the guy that's meant to be coming in, and Luke Cowan-Dickey is playing really well. I think Gabriel Ogra is just excellent. Luke Cowan-Dickey was the other person that I was considering to put in that other hooker shirt. He is really mobile. He's really good. It's just his line out throwing is just, I like 3 out of 5. He's great, and then he just has one that just goes skew if. I'd rather pick it to a guy that is less experienced, a true bolter, no England caps at this stage, I believe. Only play for England A's, so yeah, I'm picking him in there. And then that leads us to the final position. 3 loosehead props to pick from. 2 of them are obvious, and I've got another bolter in here. Andrew Porter and Ellis Genge are the obvious selections. Porter, first name in there. Genge, second name in there. I won't talk too much about Porter just because we all know how good his work rate is, how many penalties he gets at scrum time, and obviously, you know, an Irish favourite. But Ellis Genge, you know, after coming onto the scene as a mobile loosehead prop that, you know, was famous for his running style, I think, you know, he's kind of balanced that out now with like his scrummaging is way improved, and you know, he's a real true out and out loosehead that gets around the park as well. Like he is an excellent scrummager. Don't make bones about it. I think he's had a real renaissance for his England career under his performances for the Six Nations. I think he's beaten out Finn Baxter, who was coming up and through the ranks. And he definitely deserves to be there. And then the final pick, who again is a bolter, he plays for Sale Sharks. He's also English. Is Asher Apuko Forger. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One, the first one, he's playing excellently for Sale. For 2, I'm picking bolters in positions where there isn't a lot of depth, and I think that's probably what will happen rather than this, like, you know, pick another winger or a back row forward that can be a bolter. Now, you probably want to be picking bolters in positions where you're a little bit more, you don't have as much players to pick from. He can also play both loosehead and tighthead, and that's a big deal. You know, that's, I think, way more difficult than playing left wing or right wing. Like, that is really impressive. And he's a great ball carrier as well. So, yeah, 2 bolters in this team. Yeah. So, to summarise, we'll go through the list of all the players we've got there. So, we've got 3 loosehead props, just talked about them. Andrew Porter, Ellis Genge, Asher Apuko Forger, might have butchered his name. We've got 3 hookers, Dan Sheehan, Jamie George, and Gabriel Ogra. We've got 3 tighthead props, Xander Fagerson, Tide Furlong, Will Stewart. We've got 5 second rows, Maro Itoje, Ty Byrne, Ollie Chesham, Joe McCarthy, and Dapper Jenkins. And we've got 7 back rowers in Keelan Doris, who is the tour captain, Jack Conan, Ben Earl, Tom Curry, Ben Curry, Jack Morgan, and Jack Willis. We've got 3 scrum halves, Jameson Gibson Park, Alex Mitchell, and Thomas Williams. We've got 3 fly halves. We've got Finn Russell, we've got Finn Smith, and we've got Sam Prendergast. We've got 4 centres. We've got Bundyaki, Sione Tuipulotu, Hugh Jones, and Robbie Henshaw. And in the back line, we've got in the back 3, we've got Blair Kinghorn, Hugo Keenan, James Lowe, Duran van der Merwe, Tommy Freeman, and Elliot Daly. And that's it. That's the last video you'll ever have to watch on Lions selection until you eventually watch the Lions selection. So let me know what you think. I think this is a really well thought out team. I think the weaknesses is that I don't know the bolters that are like, no caps for their country, that are coming up from more the home nations like Wales, Ireland, and Scotland. There's maybe people that I'm missing because of that. But I think in general, the philosophy of the team that I've gone for in terms of flexibility, but superstars first, and I think this is the team that's going. And I would be surprised if, just thinking out all these positions, that this is the team that doesn't go. This is the squad that doesn't go. I would be surprised if I've gotten it. I think I've got it pinned on 100% right. Just kidding. I think I've probably got 80% of the players. Genuinely. I think I'm comfortably got 80% of the players going. But let me know what you think. Let me know of anyone that you think I've missed. And yeah, see you in the next one.